every financial decision we make in our lives, where we live, where we work, where we vacation, what car we drive, where our kids go to school, what we eat, is all based on cash flow, how much cash flow we need. And yet, when it comes to our investments, we get a risk questionnaire that asks us about our feelings. How would you feel if the market dropped this much? Or how would you feel if you missed out on this type of growth? It's not about feelings, it's about that function.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of The Measuring Post. Today, we are going to be measuring what truly matters as we do each and every week. And this time, we're going to be doing it with a little bit something we've talked in the past. It's our financial lives, our well-being, and how we make ourselves get to the future. And today, I brought in a very special guest. This is Mr. Gary Preisser. He's the co-founder and partner over at Stonebriar Wealth Advisors, which is an independent firm just south of Salt Lake City in Lehi, Utah. And he's also an author who has spent his career shifting not only how families think about wealth, but moving past investment-first thinking into a structure where timing and access matter more than averages or projections. Now, his work centers on designing financial plans that solve for uncertainty, not just growth. He also has a great tool that he developed, which is called the cash flow clock. I'm going to let him explain that a little more in detail, but it's a practical way to break wealth down so it supports your real life decision making at the right moments instead of just sitting around waiting for your statements to roll in each and every week. So with that in mind, please welcome Gary to the Measuring Post. How are you today, sir?
I am doing great, Joe. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, I appreciate you coming on. This is always a fun topic. It's a bit of a dauntingly scary topic and also a really rewarding one as well, because when people think about their money, they're either in a really great place or they're really uncertain and they don't know how to make those two dots connect. And that's why I love having these conversations and really excited to see kind of what you can share. But before we get into all of that, sort of how did you get to where you are today? Obviously, from your background, I know you're the eldest of 6 kids. You had a passion maybe to go in to be a doctor in medicine. How did mathematics and numbers and stats and all that get to be?
Yeah, life doesn't always work out like you expect it to. I am the oldest of 6, grew up in Florida. One of the things I appreciated with my upbringing, both my parents were teachers, a teacher and a football coach. And so education was always a big deal for us. A lot of service, a lot of values, a lot of adding. The importance was adding value, not just for ourselves, but for our community, whether that's siblings, family, extended family, people we knew at church or other activities. So we always wanted to add value. And growing up, I thought the only 3 real professions were being a teacher, a lawyer, or a doctor. I knew that teachers didn't make any money. I knew that I didn't want to be a lawyer. So I just assumed I would be a doctor. And I was started to go down that route, but numbers were something that came very easy to me. I had an opportunity to work at an accounting firm doing tax preparation. And one of the things I noticed about that experience was people would get excited about getting a big tax refund. And they thought that was a great thing. And I had to point out to them, well, this means that you loaned money to the IRS for a year, interest-free. That's not the best thing. So I found an opportunity to use my education background to really make a difference for families, expanded that into helping small business and doing small business consulting. And now I'm able to help families and individuals do that with all aspects of their wealth, not just taxes.
So you're telling me that the government isn't just giving us free money back that we get to enjoy each and every year?
It doesn't work that way. It may look that way, but that's not how it works.
Yeah. And, I have a bit of a background in some finance. I come from a mortgage background. My family was in that space. So it's amazing to see, though, when you're going through people's finances, and I don't mean this to be condescending on any level, but sort of how naive or just in the dark they are about how things actually work. So it's really important to break these things down and make them tangible so the average Joe can understand what to do and not to do. So that really excites me to learn some of not only the tools you have, but how Stonebriar came together. So I know you started the company with Shay, your business partner,
Yep.
And you're sort of the precision and structure guy, and he's more of the growth and relationship side. So tell me how the two of you met and how this all came to be.
We worked together in a firm in Orlando for a few years, and after work, we talk about what we would do differently if we had the chance. And we do have a different skill set. He's coming from more on the marketing and sales side, and I'm coming more from the tax and the financial planning side of things. But what we realized in bringing our books together, our businesses together, and starting Stonebriar about 4.5 years ago, that there's a problem with our industry, and I think you nailed it. You hit the nail on the head, Joe. Our industry makes things seem more complicated than they actually are. I see a lot of from advisors, they telling clients, trust me with your money. Don't pay attention to what I'm doing behind the curtain. Pay no attention to the man behind the curtain, right? Because this is too complicated for you to understand. And the advisor uses jargon and these buzzwords that don't mean anything to anyone, but it sounds sophisticated, but it doesn't add value to the client. And when the market's up, we advisors expect to be congratulated like we did something. And when the market's down, well, you can't blame us, the market's down. The reality is that these concepts for financial planning and wealth management are very simple. The application of them can be very nuanced and very individual, but we need to understand these concepts. You may still need an advisor to help you with your plan, but there's no reason to just say, hey, this is too complicated. I'm just going to let somebody else take care of it. We can handle, and we should handle a lot of this ourselves because we're stewards of our money. We worked hard for it. We need to make sure that it works hard for us and that it actually is able to perform its function, not just to grow, but to actually be utilized properly.
Yeah, and have the ability to actually use it when you need it and to be able to access that instead of having it tied and locked away into things. But I love how you mentioned being like a steward for your own financial well-being.
Yes.
We've had, medical professionals on that say the same thing. You have to advocate for yourself, whether it's your health or your wealth, because no
Yep.
one's going to come in and bring you that magic pill that does everything for you. So it really is about understanding your options, ways that you can save your money in a structured and secure way, but also to allow it to grow, but to be able to use it. So that's the one thing I've talked to many wealth advisors before, that they have the hardest time explaining that, but that's the most important key. That's sort of when the light bulb goes off for the individual, like, I didn't know I could put my money in this type of account or to utilize it in this way to grow and still be able to access it. So I love where, the tagline for Stonebriar is where vision meets strategy and wealth becomes legacy. Can you tell me sort of what that means in plain language?
Vision, we have to understand what the purpose is for our money. And assets are not trophies. It's not about, look what I have. It's not about showing off. It's, to your point, how are they utilized? And every single dollar that we have will be used at some point in time by somebody. It might as well be us because it's our money and we earned it. But we have to understand purpose first. So many prospective clients will come into my office and they'll say, if I gave you $50,000 or $500,000 or $5 million, where would you put it? And early in my career, I would try to answer that question. What I realized is that the only answer to that question is a question in return, and that is, what is the money for? If we don't know what the money's for, then how can we know where it should be, what it should do, when it's going to need to be accessible? And that's what we really focus on at Stonebriar, is the function of wealth, not just the accumulation of it.
Yeah, and that's something that you guys talk about. Even just going to your website, you can learn about what you call the STONE framework, which is securing your vision, tailoring your plan, optimizing your wealth, navigating your life, and elevating your legacy. Now, I love that it's obviously an acronym that goes with
Yes.
the brand name. Very good marketing and branding right there. But really, it's a simple 5-pillar sort of acronym that really makes a lot of sense when you break it down, one by one. So what sort of systems do you guys utilize to help people get to that STONE framework? What's sort of the onboarding process for somebody just walking through your doors or doing sort of a cold call to figure out how you can help?
The key is the questions that we start with. The industry as a whole tends to start with products and allocations, or they start with a risk questionnaire. It's fascinating to me that every financial decision we make in our lives, where we live, where we work, where we vacation, what car we drive, where our kids go to school, what we eat, is all based on cash flow. Okay, how much cash flow we need. And yet when it comes to our investments, we get a risk questionnaire that asks us about our feelings. How would you feel if the market dropped this much? Or how would you feel if you missed out on this type of growth? It's not about feelings. It's about that function, right? And so at Stonebriar, we start with securing the vision, asking about the purpose for the dollars. If we don't understand the purpose, it's like going to the doctor and saying, I'm tired, and they just hand you a prescription for something just based on one symptom. We need to understand what's the purpose for every dollar. What are we trying to accomplish? If we aim at nothing, we're going to hit it. So let's take the time. We take our time with the client to help them understand what they're trying to accomplish. And it takes some time because most people that come into our office have never thought about it in these terms. They know that their money's supposed to grow, that they're supposed to save, they're supposed to live within their means. But especially as they start to shift into retirement, where they're going into the distribution phase of their life, everything should change. They need to look at it differently. But it starts with asking those questions first and foremost.
Yeah, and I think you're absolutely right. Most people kind of have the old ostrich head in the sand mentality. Like, if I just don't open up my statement, I'll never have to either acknowledge my bad behavior or see what's really happening. And that is sort of the first step, I think, in any aspect of growth in life. It's taking that accountability and really having an internal reflection on, like, what have I been doing? Is it working or not? If not, how do we pivot and find the right answer? But, I want to step back to what you said about cash
Yep.
flow, because that's part of the tool that you developed, the cash flow clock. So
Yes.
explain what that tool is and how people utilize that in their, accumulation of wealth.
Most portfolios are demonstrated or visualized with a pie chart. And they take a slice, they look at your age and your risk questionnaire, your risk profile, and here's a moderately conservative allocation. You may have some bonds, international stocks, large cap, mid cap, whatever it is. And it's static, and it only changes when your feelings or your age changes. But life is not lived over time. It's not lived at static. It doesn't stay still, right? Life is lived in moments, and our financial plan needs to support each moment. And so that's where the concept of the cash flow clock came to being. The allocation isn't static. It moves through time. And the money that we need to use soon, really in the next 5 to 10 years, that should not be exposed to any type of volatility. It shouldn't have any opportunity to lose, because liquidity is the first priority for money we need to use soon. For money that we don't need to use for a long time, 10 plus years, that's where volatility is no longer a threat. It's an opportunity to actually create growth. Now, generic portfolios do this sort of with that 60-40 rule of 100, take 100, subtract your age, that determines the allocation. But that's talking about scale. It's talking about laws of large numbers. It's talking about thousands or even millions of households. It's not talking about your household because each of us is individual based on our cash flow. And by using this tool, we're able to customize and tailor each and every plan to our client's exact needs.
Yeah, and that's brilliant because not everyone has the same goals or desires, or also limitations and boundaries. Some people have different hurdles and things that they have to get over, different life expenses, medical problems, taking care of sick elderly parents. There's a
Yep.
lot of things that, sort of go into that. It's not cookie cutter, which, I always find the worst people to deal with in any profession are the ones that have a cookie cutter solution for every single client,
Yes.
because it doesn't get to the root of what my goal is versus what your goal is. And we might have two vastly different lifestyles where maybe I need way more money to retire on for my comfortability or what I have to pay for than what you do, or the next person down the road. So it's a really wise strategy to sort of dive in deeper to that. But is this like a survey you do? Is it a software you use? How do people access this tool?
It's a survey more than anything, and we're working on the tool. So I appreciate the motivation to do that because
Yeah.
it isn't complicated. It's asking the different questions though. What is the purpose? Purpose determines the timing. Once we understand the timing, now we can design a plan that makes sense. If you tell me you need $25,000 in 6 months, I'm not going to put that in Bitcoin. I'm not
Yeah.
going to put it in the market. I'm not going to expose it to volatility, but I'm also not going to put it in a 12-month CD. There's no volatility there. There's no risk of loss. It may be appropriate or compliant, but it's not functional because it's not liquid. It's not available when you need it. And so by asking those simple questions, what's your income versus your expenses? So many people focus on what's your number for retirement. Well, if you have Social Security and pension or in a pension that brings in more income than you're spending on a monthly basis, you never really need to touch those assets. I want you to spend them. Please spend them your money. But that's a very different situation than someone exactly your same age, same number of assets, but now their income is much less than their expenses. They're having to use those assets on a monthly basis. And the risk questionnaire, the risk profile does not account for that at all. It simply says you're both 65, you're both conservative, your investments are going to be exactly the same. So by taking that survey, taking that questionnaire and changing it from how do you feel to what do you need and why do you need it, that will tell us when we need it. And then we're able to choose the best investment for each role or each job in the portfolio, as opposed to expecting the entire portfolio to generate income, give us the most growth, protect us from downturns, create a legacy, do this, do that, and do everything. That's never going to be effective.
Yeah, and I love that you mentioned that because we go through seasons of life too where your financial needs are much different. Like when you're in your early 20s, maybe you're just fresh out of college or you didn't go, you're trying to find yourself. You're usually living check to check and just trying to, not get evicted from your apartment or kicked out of somewhere. And then you get in your 30s, which I felt when I was in my 30s, that's sort of where I made the biggest growth steps in my career, really decided who I wanted to be, kind of went down my political or my career path. And from there, starting to have children. Now I'm in my 40s, things are a little different. Now I'm not so worried about, can I cover my monthly bills? Now it's sort of this strategy of, am I doing the right things with the money I am making to make sure that I will be able to live with my money? I don't want to outlive what I've accumulated.
Yes.
But a lot of that comes with understanding the types of investments. And yeah, we can have a 401k, you can have an IRA, you can have a little Bitcoin, a little high risk money, maybe in the market. CDs are great, but I think a lot of people hear those terms and words and it's sort of deer in the headlights. It's like, what do those actually mean? What sort of percentage breakdown would you typically recommend without knowing somebody's full background? Like as far as safe investments, mid risks, high risks, what's sort of the balance that most people should try to attain so they can start to see their accumulation of wealth maybe exponentially grow instead of like $1,000 a month every year?
So you bring up some very excellent points and excellent questions, Joe. And let me clarify one thing really quickly, because I get this a lot. We hear about different investments, and some of the buzzwords we hear are IRA, 401k, Roth, and those aren't investments. Those are tax accounts. That affects us from a tax standpoint. So, and this is important to understand because each one is taxed differently, and it affects our bottom line very differently. So we need to understand those accounts. So we need to look at it from a tax standpoint. We also need to look at it from an investment standpoint. And when we look at investments, it's really about how is volatility assigned. When we talk about, we see this a lot with low or conservative portfolios, low volatility, but they're still doing bonds, which still have risk associated with them. They can still lose value. In 2022, the bond index lost 13%. That's not a very safe investment. Whereas a CD is absolutely guaranteed not to lose. You're just not going to get much growth. The biggest problem that I see typically is that most investors, especially younger investors, are not taking on enough volatility. They're in these generic target date funds or blended funds where they're assuming that a portion, anywhere from 10 to maybe 60%, is in bonds. And if you're 30 or 40 years old in an IRA or a 401k that you're not going to be able to touch for 20 years, bonds are just limiting your growth. Over time, those large cap growth stocks are most likely to give you the most efficient growth. So for the portion of your portfolio that you're not going to need for 10, 20, 30 years, that is where we should take as much volatility as you're comfortable with. Again, that doesn't mean putting it in Bitcoin, but it may include that, and let that grow. And the reason we can let that grow is because we have set aside enough for emergency funds, for short-term savings, for vacations, for weddings, for education, whatever that is, in the no volatility zone, or the safe or lazy zone, as we call it. By having that in place, it means we're never having to sell out of our volatile assets out of desperation. The biggest problem that most people have isn't necessarily their investments, it's the timing of how they're utilizing them. I played college baseball way back in the day. And what I learned is you can work really hard, you can practice, you can train, you can have a perfect swing. But if you're a split second too early, it's going to be a ground ball. You're a split second too late, and it's a pop-up. But if you get the timing right, it could be a home run. I didn't have a lot of home runs playing baseball, but it helped me understand that timing is critical. And that's why the portfolio needs to be so unique, because each client's timing is unique as well.
Yeah, and you hit a couple of really key points that I think a lot of traditional investment strategy would sort of back up, but I think your strategy is wiser. You talk about putting the money you don't need for 10 plus years in something a little more volatile. That's sort of your set it forget it money, which a lot of
Yes.
people do with things like Bitcoin, because
Hmm.
and I've known some people that got in really early and now they're laughing all the way, but I missed that boat myself. But the reality is, those things you do want to be able to let sort of percolate and grow and be in their own zone where you don't have to think about them. But
Yes.
there was always this story like the grandma and grandpa. Well, when they wanted a vacation, they had an envelope when they put cash in that one, and this was the new furnace money. And this was for the new car, and they sort of had these different little areas where they would save money. But you're doing that in an era that we can't keep up with that anymore. The dollar is
Right.
not. It's losing value. We have to be
Yep.
smarter with where we place our funds. But the old sort of adage too, always have like 6 months reserves in liquid for your emergency fund. But don't just even put that in just like a Wells Fargo or Chase savings account.
Oh,
At
please
least put
don't.
it in like yeah, don't do that, because then your money just sits there and gains 18 cents a year. There's even things like at least put it into a high yield savings account where you get 3% back if you're
Yes.
lucky. But for let's break down sort of the buckets that people really should focus on for your safety net, the lazy money as you call it, or the
Yep.
safe zone. What's the best type of account for someone to just stock away 20 or 30 grand for their 6 month rainy day fund?
Yes. So liquidity is the first priority, and you've hit the nail on the head, Joe, for sure with this. Is I want to get as high a rate as possible, but liquidity is the first priority. So many people say, well, you're going to lose to inflation. I don't care about inflation for money that I'm going to use in 6 months. So inflation only affects us over longer periods of time. Liquidity is the first priority. Now, that being said, why are we putting hundreds of thousands of dollars in some cases in a Wells Fargo savings account making 0.2% or less at other banks, where you can go to? It's kind of amazing how credit cards have these high yield savings accounts. American Express, Capital One, Discover, no free plugs, right? Marcus from Goldman Sachs, you can get at least 3% that's completely liquid. I use SoFi Bank myself. I know Ally Bank. These online banks offer higher interest rates. It's worth the time to figure out what's the right solution for you, as long as it gives us the liquidity so that your money's working for you as efficiently or as hard as you've worked for it. And I think too many people, to your point, they put the blinders on, they put their head in the sand and say, I've always been at this bank. This is what my parents have done. No, it's a different world. Interest rates are in a different spot right now. And if we're not at least keeping up, we are losing to inflation. And it's not going to affect our entire portfolio the same way. But why accept less than what's readily available for free out there? Let's take advantage of the opportunities while we can.
Yeah, and I was very much that way growing up. Like when I was in my early 20s, I moved to South Dakota, took an on-air radio job out there, and was like open up my first, big boy bank account. And it was either First Bank of South Dakota or Wells Fargo. So
Yes.
I'm like, well, I don't know how long I'll live in South Dakota, so I'll go to Wells Fargo, put a little money in savings, and kept it there for so long. And I look back at that as such a bonehead move because, at one point the number in there was pretty decent before I started putting them in real investments, and I was doing what we're told not to now, like put all your money in savings. You can't retire on savings, guys. That's rule
That's
number
right.
one. But, I would have this large amount of money in there. And then I'm looking at my annual return and I got like $4. I'm like, what? This is crazy. And then I did go, no plug included either. American Express, I moved my savings over there. But
Yep.
American Express, if you want to sponsor, call me.
That's
But
right.
it was amazing the difference in just like the first year. I was like, I made more in the first year of being there than I did the 15 previous years at Wells Fargo by a large amount. It wasn't even close. And that's like free money because it's going to sit there regardless.
That's right.
Those little tactics are so valuable because people just, if you don't know, you don't know.
That's
And
right.
it's really amazing. And then, I switched out of Wells Fargo banking and I opened an account over at Charles Schwab.
Okay.
And the reality is because, I did some research. You could go to Fidelity, these other brokerages. I just went with Schwab because I knew some people that were using it and really liked it.
Sure.
But that gives you, even if you don't understand financial assets and tools at your disposal, going to a brokerage is so much smarter than your local bank because they're going to give you some options to at least get your feet wet and start the process of learning how to invest.
Yes.
So I think that's a really important piece as well. But I'm curious to your thoughts on like these new fly by night sort of online investment platforms. There's like the AI platforms that help you invest and they trade for you. Obviously, it seems like, too good to be true. And I have not gone down any of those rabbit holes. Have you seen or do you have any endorsement for any of those type of tools that are probably very popular online right now?
I'm sure they are, and I appreciate companies that are trying to do things better than how they've been done. For our clients, we use Fidelity and Schwab as our custodians because they've been around for a long time. I have a lot of respect for a lot of the things that Robinhood does, and there's some other smaller custodians. The first thing is make sure that you're not giving your money to Stonebriar or to an advisor, please. Utah seems to be a hot spot for those types of scams. Make sure you're giving your money to an accredited custodian to hold the assets. But don't think that that's enough. It's similar to in our industry. Some people will come into my office and they'll stare me in the eye and get really serious and say, I have a question for you. Are you a fiduciary? And I'll look back at them and I'll say, I absolutely am a fiduciary. And then I'll ask them a question. Do you know what a fiduciary is? And they have no idea. They just know that they were supposed to ask it. And I'm glad they're asking it. But a fiduciary is someone who has to act in the best interest of the client. That's the minimum. That doesn't mean that they're good at their job. It means that they have a license and that they have an obligation. But I've seen a lot of well-intentioned fiduciaries make very poor recommendations to their clients, either because they didn't understand the situation, they didn't ask the right questions, or they didn't have access to the right investments. And it's the same thing with your custodian. Just because you're with Schwab or Fidelity or Vanguard or whoever it is, there are so many investments and some are good or some are bad. The real question is, what's the best investment for you as the investor? And that's going to be different for each person. And that requires more accountability, taking the time to understand your purpose and doing research to be able to measure what's a good investment and what's a bad investment. I love that the name of your podcast is The Measuring Post, because I think our industry measures success the wrong way. We focus on average rates of return. And if I ask most of your listeners, if I get you a 7% rate of return, would you be happy with that? And most would be thrilled because their Monte Carlo simulation said that if they get 7% over 30 years, they're going to be okay. But if the market's up 30 and I got you 7, should you still be happy about that? Especially if you're paying me money to actually give you a return that you could have gotten better just by doing it yourself. And that's a concept that's called alpha when it comes to investments. And that's one of the things that's in some of the books that we've written. We talk a lot about alpha. You shouldn't pay for negative alpha. We see negative alpha way too often, but you can just be in the benchmark. If you want to take half the volatility of the benchmark, put half of your money in the S&P, put half of it in a high yield savings account, and you're going to come out ahead than 96% of mutual funds that underperform by 3% per year, and it costs you money to do it. But the real thing we need to measure is what's the alignment to the purpose for each client. What are the right investments that are going to have the function that client needs at the time that they need it?
Yeah. And I love how you really sort of shine the light on being a fiduciary and understanding what that means, but also like, don't just give me your money. Like
Right.
we have to go deeper than that. And that it just sort of made me laugh in my head. I was thinking this will showcase my age a little bit and yours too, I'm sure. Growing up watching like The Simpsons, the TV show, and there was Dr. Nick, the crazy zany doctor. And one of the episodes is like, well, even the guy who gets the worst scores ends up being a doctor, right?
That's right.
So he might have great intentions, but if you're not really doing it with the skill set or the right moral standing, all of that doesn't matter. So you have to go a layer deeper than that and really do your research. And if you're just joining us, guys, I'm talking to Gary Preisser. He's the co-founder of Stonebriar Wealth Advisors. And you mentioned something in your last little talk there about writing books. So tell us a little bit. I know you wrote an ebook called The Differentiators of Wealth, and I know you're working on a couple others. Tell us about the book and what you go over and cover in those pages.
So The Differentiators of Wealth is a tough word, a tough title to say. You did a great job, Joe. It's tough for me to say, and I wrote it, so I appreciate that. But we get, my partner Shay and I, in our business, we kept getting the same issues over and over and over again. And there's these concepts that make a huge difference in a portfolio, but they're not talked about by most advisors because they're not going as deep as they need to go. One of them is timing. We've talked a little bit about the importance of timing and what a difference that makes. We've talked about outperforming the benchmark, or at least keeping up with the benchmark with alpha. But another thing that's really important is something called asset location. Now, I think everyone's familiar with asset allocation. That's deciding which investments to choose. But we need to understand the tax layer of this as well. And I'll explain this really quickly because I think it's really important. If you have two investment options that you're considering, and you want half of your assets in a conservative mutual fund that you expect to earn about 5% per year, and you have another mutual fund that's more aggressive, you expect to earn 10% per year. Which one of these do you want to pay tax on? The short answer is you don't want to pay tax on either one, right?
Yeah, that's what I was going to say.
But if you have to choose, if half of your money is in a traditional IRA and half of your money is in a Roth IRA, you want the highest growth to be tax-free and the lower growth to be taxable if you have to do that option. I've analyzed thousands and thousands of portfolios. Every one that I've looked at tends to have, if the allocation is half and half, they will have half of the IRA in aggressive and half of the IRA in conservative, and the same thing for the Roth. Instead of understanding the tax implications and putting all of the aggressive in the Roth and all of the conservative in the IRA, the allocation is the same, the risk profile is the same, but the tax impact is very different, and that can make a difference of 1 to 1.5% per year. And that's why we called it the differentiators, because with that compounding effect over 20, 30, maybe 60 years, what a difference that can make to your wealth. It's a simple concept that I explained in about 2 or 3 minutes. And in my experience, I've never seen another advisor actually utilize that in their portfolios, because most financial advisors are really investment advisors and they don't take taxes into account. They don't consider them at all, even though every decision, every recommendation that they're making affects the taxes in some way, shape, or form. And so we've got to look at it from both sides.
Yeah, and some of the wisest books I've read written by financial people, they really touch on that topic. And that's something that was always really foreign to me, understanding how the taxes will play into effect later in life. Or, for example, everyone gets the traditional 401k with their job, but, pulling money from that is not just like free money. It's not just like,
No,
I already put this away. There's big penalties and big tax, slaps on the wrist for utilizing your own, which in your mind, you think this is my money. No, it's not. So you got to be very careful and understand what you're putting your money into. And I love that a big part of Stonebriar's strategy is it's not so much of like that dollar amount. How much money do you need to retire? It's, well, when do you actually want to use your money?
Yes.
Like, do you need it? Like you said, in 6 months, do you need 20, 25 grand? Or do you need $1 million in 10 years from now? Because those are two wildly different paths that you'll go down to achieve those goals. So I think it's really understanding your own vision, which is part of what you guys talk about in the Stone method or framework, understanding what you need, but then where do you begin to get there? Because a lot of people are going to hop on the internet. They're going to go to ChatGPT. They're going to Google and they go, I need to retire someday. How do I do that? And here comes the 9 million resources and gurus and internet personalities that tell you, just do this, just do that. So how do you sort of cut through that noise and really pinpoint what you need as an individual, whether it's me or my neighbor or 3 states over in a completely different lifestyle? Obviously talking to a fiduciary or responsible financial advisor, but
Yes.
for the average Joe or Jane, how do you cut through the noise and start today?
It's a great question because, like I said, these concepts are not complicated. We want to understand your income, especially as we're thinking about moving into retirement. What will your income look like when you retire? Are you going to have Social Security? We hope Social Security is still around. Are we going to have a pension? There's not many pensions out there. Do you have rental properties? Do you have business income from other interests? Do you have passive income? Are you still going to do some consulting? Are you going to work on a golf course? There's lots of different types of income, and each person's different. And then what are your expenses? Not just what do you need to survive? Because this isn't about surviving. This is about thriving. A lot of my clients admire the ants from Aesop's fable who saved food for the winter. But what they don't realize is that at the end of the fable, the ants ate the food. They didn't just look at it to admire it. They used it. And so many of our clients, as you're moving into retirement, they need to give themselves permission to use their money. So understanding first what you need to survive, but also what do you want to be able to spend in retirement? A lot of people assume that they're going to be in a lower tax bracket when they're retired. But if you want to be able to do the things you've always wanted to, your bucket list, travel, gifting to family, to charities, whatever that is, where's that money coming from? Are you going to have to pay tax on it? How is that going to affect you? How's it going to affect your family? So asking income and expenses, and then looking at your assets and how they are positioned now for their purpose, and how that purpose will evolve as you get closer to retirement. Because it's true that you need to take less risk or have less volatility rather as you get closer to using that money. But you should not rely on a glide path with a target fund that adjusts your volatility the same as it adjusts millions of other people that are in that same mutual fund. We need to make sure that it's specified to each individual. And the easy first step is to understand what is the needs for that individual household. And then we can determine the timing of when that money is going to be available. And now, even if you're going to search it on AI or whatever you're going to use, now it becomes much more specific. It's not asking how much money do I need to retire in 5 years. It's what is the best tool to fulfill the role for this portion of my portfolio that I'm going to be using in 7 years or 10 years or 15. And it's not perfect to do that. It's never perfect, but at least we're going to have a much better chance of being successful if we're as specific as we can be.
I love that. And that's really honestly a unique strategy that I've not heard many people talk about, is really sort of kind of segmenting your life.
Yep.
And understanding what you need when you need it. Because I think we all kind of grow up, you go to high school, go to college, put yourself in a tremendous amount of debt, go get the corporate job, you work it for 40 years, you get the gold watch at the end of your tenure, you get a pension, which doesn't exist anymore. You hope
Yes.
Social Security's around, but it probably won't be, not for too many more generations, if at all. So these are things that I think it's pre-built into our brains that we have to just work till you're 75. Then either you croak or you get a part-time job at Walmart as a door greeter because you didn't do it right. But I love that your strategy focuses on the here and now and sort of that vision. And again, I love that you mentioned the Aesop's fable. I used to have that big book when I was growing up in my room. But the reality is you don't get to take it with you when you go to the grave, right? So, and if you don't have family to pass it down to, or if you don't have anything to pass down, why did you do all that work all those years? It was simply to survive in a struggle that probably you didn't want in the first place, or a career path you didn't. So be smart with what you're doing with your money, guys, and start as soon as you can. I wish I would have started 15, 20 years earlier than I did. because I would have been able to be much further ahead than I am. But as the old, Chinese proverb goes, the best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago. The next best time is now. So don't sleep on learning about these tactics and the ability to utilize your money now, in the near future, and in the long-term future. So having those layered onion peel sort of strategies are really crucial to put a use right now. So I love what Stonebriar is doing. And I know that you do have the free ebook. Where can we find that to kind of get our financial juices flowing?
Yeah, our website is stonebriarwealthadvisors.com. You can also reach out to me on LinkedIn. Love to connect. And I appreciate you bring up that Chinese proverb, because my staff is so sick of me saying that proverb, but it's so accurate. The two questions that new clients usually ask us is, they say, I wish I'd met you 20 years ago. And can you teach my kids this information so that they don't make the same mistakes that I make? We spend a lot of time correcting or adjusting things that were not optimized. That's why the O is optimize your wealth. We want to optimize it as best we can and keep it aligned to the plan. Nobody's perfect. I joke that at Stonebriar, we create perfect plans if we know when our client is going to die and everything that's going to happen to them between now and then, as well as what's going to happen in the tax code and what's going to happen in the market. So, of course, we never know that. Our goal is not be perfect, but it is to be able to adjust along the way, like the Apollo moon mission, so that we're always at least have a chance to land where we want, even though we may be off course a little bit each time. We can only measure what adjustments need to be made if we understand our purpose and we are able to constantly realign to that. And so starting with that will put anyone who's listening so far ahead of anyone else that is just putting their head in the sand and hoping for the best. Hope is not a strategy when it comes to your finances.
I found that out the hard way, unfortunately, Gary. But no, I love one thing you just said about, people coming to you and saying, yeah, I wish I would have started 20 years ago, but the next part is better. Help me teach my kids this.
Yes.
Help me get them on the right path. Because I didn't really do so much of the investment stuff as a mortgage broker, but I had to deal with people and their credit scores
Yes.
and what they do with their funds and how they pay back bills. And the running joke always was, when I was in college, I got the little $500 credit union credit card. And it was, to me, my little immature brain, it was free money. I spent all $500 and then I just didn't answer the phone for 2 years. and as a guy that was giving advice on credit, at one point in my late teens, I had the lowest credit score I had ever seen on paper ever. And now, obviously, I've rebounded for many years and know what to do now. But, for $500, it took me 7 years to get my credit back on track. I might as well have been a bankruptcy, when it was literally just me being too afraid to pick up the phone and saying, I don't have $500. I'm 18. I'm stupid. And so now my son, who's he just finished his freshman year in college, I was able to steer him away from those silly mistakes. And here he is, his first year of having a credit line, and he's in the mid 700s. And it wasn't anything, overwhelmingly insightful. It was just, hey, don't be a knucklehead like I was. It's just passing that knowledge down.
Yes.
So I love that. Yes. And that's what we're doing for our kids. And please, if you're listening, regardless of where you're at, if you got those kids and grandkids under you, set them up right now. And it just makes their whole life easier. And then you don't have to, then you can be the dad or the grandpa that saved the whole family because you gave them this nice piece of advice. So I love that. I think that's really powerful. And again, guys, check out stonebriarwealthadvisors.com, get the ebook there, learn about the Stone framework, and just talk to someone, whether it's Gary or someone else in your circle. These are conversations that you want to have. They will help you get to where you want, utilizing the time frame that's most valuable to you. So, yeah, I really appreciate all the insight on that, and definitely excited to see what I can continue to grow with mine. So, Gary, I'll give you one final plea to the audience. What's one thing you would tell somebody today, if you could just give them one piece of advice, if they took nothing else from this conversation? What's one piece of wisdom from Gary Preisser?
Don't be like Joe at 18. I'm just kidding. We want to learn from Joe's mistakes as well. And we have the Differentiators of Wealth is an ebook. We also have the Essence of Wealth, which is designed for kids and grandkids to get that starting point. But the one thing I would leave is Start with purpose. What's your why? Simon Sinek is a great influence on what we've done for finances, but take the time to really decide, what are you aiming for? What are you trying to accomplish? Because life is too short. Assets and resources are too limited. We want to make sure that they're working as efficiently as possible in the direction you want them to go, as opposed to just letting things happen by default. There's no reason for that to happen.
Love it. Great advice and definitely great information you shared today. Again, guys, check out Gary Preisser, StonebriarWealthAdvisors.com. Find him on LinkedIn, connect, learn, grow, get that free ebook. These are the building blocks that you can start utilizing today to get you to where you want to be tomorrow. So with that in mind, Gary, thank you for your time today and joining us on the Measuring Post. Very insightful, and look forward to catching up with you again soon.
Thanks, Joe.